Morning. You hear me? Yeah? This morning, I put the chair there. Did anybody get nervous when I put the chair there? Because I suddenly thought some people might do. Jean's nodding at me going. Can I just apologise? First of all, I shouldn't start with an apology really, but to some of those who were at Friday Club, there were bits of this that you may have already heard, so I had to apologise. But I just think it's right for this morning. I normally have some kind of PowerPoint or something magical and modern for you. I've not done this for a long time. Today I've got a bag of stuff, which most people would say she normally has a bag of stuff anyway. Anybody who's ever picked my handbag up know that. But this morning, I want us to think a little bit, and it's funny actually, because I wasn't sure whether this message was right for this morning. And I always say, if there's anybody can read my mind in here, it's Rob. And I've got to say, Rob this morning has tied in with exactly what I want us to talk about. Because I want to talk about this morning stepping out in faith and trust. And I've entitled this morning's talk, Have We Got What It Takes? Because stepping out in faith and trust is one thing, and I'm amazed that Rob actually managed to put 2 feet on water and try it. But have we actually got what it takes? Because it's one thing knowing what our challenge is, but it's a completely different thing to actually have the faith to do it. And more importantly, I think what we've got to remember is that we will succeed if it's what God has told us to do. It's got to be born from God. So I don't know how many of you like challenges. Perhaps we should have a show of hands. Who likes a challenge? Oh, there's a couple. When I asked myself that question, I thought, no, I don't actually. I like a nice, quiet life. And then I sat and thought about it. And I actually, whilst I was doing this, walked into my study. And the first thing that took my eye, and these were only some, were lateral thinking, Sudoku, professors being just diabolical brain benders, maths magic, and I thought, actually, and then I looked at the shelf, and I had them on the shelf. And then it got better, because I thought, I actually must quite like problems. And I think probably being a mathematician helps. And then I thought, I really must, because somebody had been talking to me about computer games this week, because we did computer design at college. And I suddenly realised that I bought my DS just because I wanted to play all of the Professor Layton games, which again, are problem solving. And I thought, really, I must like a challenge. There's part of me that must be programmed to solving things or even enjoy being challenged. And we serve a God who wants us to live a life that's dependent on Him, that's not dependent on other people, that's not dependent on ourselves, but solely dependent on Him. And it's probably why we find that sometimes in life we face challenges. Because those of us sat here this morning, and there's probably a lot of us, who face challenges in life would probably say that we've come out the other side more dependent on God and more trusting of God. However, there's nothing new in us facing challenges. Throughout the Bible, we see characters and God's people who face challenges in many different ways. They faced challenges as a nation. The Israelites were captive in Egypt, and eventually later on were captive also in Babylon. And yet, despite those challenges, some still emerged with a faith. Some faced personal challenges, like Stephen, who was one of the first martyrs and yet still held on to his faith. But there were others that were actually set challenges directly by God, like Noah. Noah, I don't even mean Noah. I don't know where Noah came in. Noah was set a challenge by God, wasn't he, to build a boat? But I was going to say Jonah. Whoever the message of Noah's for, there you go, have it. Jonah. And Jonah was told to go to Nineveh. And Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. But ultimately, because that was God's instruction for him, Jonah arrived in Nineveh. Jonah arrived to complete the challenge that he was given. When God challenges his people, they must have enough faith and trust to accept the challenge that they're given. Because you can be given a challenge, but you may not fulfill that challenge unless you have the faith and trust. We actually had a guy at work who used to do all our outward bound. I don't know if I've told you this before, I might have. He used to do all our outward bound, and he used to take us abseiling. And I abseil quite a lot when, probably between the age of being Finn's age and Olivia's age. But somehow fear must have taken over, because when I started teaching, suddenly I discovered the first time we went out that I couldn't abseil. But every time I managed to do, those of you who've ever done it will know that the hardest bit is stepping over that edge and being leant back so you're looking at the sky. I could do that bit. But I'd get there and he'd shout at me, "Will you walk? Just walk backwards." And I couldn't. I could not move my feet. And I think it's because I was challenged, but I didn't have the trust anymore that I could actually do it. And that's the thing, you've got to be able to trust and believe that you can actually accept the challenge and do it. And we can do it. We can do it because we do it in God's strength. In Exodus 14, the Israelites have left Egypt and they've arrived at a dead end. They arrive at the Red Sea. They've got the Egyptian soldiers behind them, trapping them. And there seems to be no way out. And God tells Moses to hold up his staff. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had said to God, I've got all these people behind me that I've brought out of Egypt, just like you've told me, and there's an Egyptian army behind them, and I've come to this dead end here, what on earth am I supposed to do? And God says to me, hold up a piece of wood that's basically a stick. I think I'd have been a bit concerned. I think I'd have been saying things like, God, I actually need a solution to this. This water's deep, we can't cross it. I need something. But actually, for once, despite Moses' character, we actually see Moses do exactly what he's asked. Despite the fact that he's in front of a broad river with a load of people behind him that he's supposed to be rescuing, he just holds up the staff. Moses, as far as we can tell, does it without fuss, despite any doubts that he has, and the sea parts. Imagine what would have happened if he hadn't have had the faith to do it. The Israelites would have been captured and returned to Egypt. And then I started to think a bit more about what that would have meant. And actually at the time, if you think about it, they'd stopped all the Hebrew women from having any male children. Therefore, what would have happened was the nation would have actually died out. And it probably all hinged on Moses actually having the guts to do as God had said and hold up that staff. Another one, Genesis 22. And we find a different challenge. A challenge that doesn't involve an entire nation. Or maybe it does ultimately later on. But a challenge that was given to Abraham to take his son and sacrifice him. And Abraham, when you read that chapter, it struck me that actually even from verse 2, Abraham knows from the very beginning what his challenge is. He knows his challenge is to take his son and sacrifice him. And I'm not a mother, but a lot of you in here are. And I can't imagine, or should I say, sorry men, I've just discounted you lot, or a father. But I can't imagine what it must be like to know that that is your challenge. And I do think that ultimately Abraham probably thought that God would do something and intervene. But still, there was always that chance that God would stick to his word and that Abraham would actually have to kill his own son. And yet Abraham, without any fuss or without anyone knowing, takes his son and goes to the exact place that God tells him to go. Abraham was willing to give the most precious thing that he had, his son, so that he could learn to trust in God's provision. Because by being willing to offer his son, God actually showed him that in the end he didn't need to sacrifice his son because God provided something else. And then God makes him a promise that blesses him because he displays that trust in God. It takes courage for people to place their trust in God. But when we're challenged, we can do so with confidence. Because we know that whatever God is asking us to do, he is with us and he's in it with us. And he won't let us down. I was sent a YouTube clip and I was going to play it, but it's a bit long. But if anybody wants the link, I'll send it you later on. And the clip is a lady who talks about what happens when you're asked to do something, or you feel you should do something, or you're challenged to do something. And basically what she's saying is that from that point that you are asked, challenged, or think you should, up until you actually doing something, the longer that period of time is, the less likely you are to act on it. And I sat and thought about it, and I thought, actually, it's probably true. Because how often are we asked by God to do something, and we think, actually, we're busy at the minute, so I'll take it, and I'm only talking small things here. I'll take it and I'll think about it. And then it might be days and days later that you do whatever he's asked you. And then the person who you've gone to or whatever says to you, actually, earlier this week, and you think, if I'd have done it when God immediately told me to do it, I'd have been there at that exact moment, or I'd have been there at that exact time. And I think as Christians, we're quite good at doing what God asks us, but do we actually give it our priority? And sometimes we're asked to do big things, and because they seem so big, or God gives us a vision for something so big, we actually leave it, and we don't just prayerfully think about it. We actually leave it till we've actually let all this fear jump in and thinking, actually, what about this? What about that? What about the other? Will I really be able to do that? And, have we really got the money to do that? And can we afford to give this up? And can we afford to give that up? And we put all these obstacles in the way of the challenge that God gives us. So I actually think, when I watch that YouTube video, that what we actually need to do is that when God speaks and when God gives us a vision, we need to give it priority of our time. Because so often in the world in which many of us live, where we have very busy jobs, where we're running around looking after families, where we're doing stuff at church and everything else, it's so easy to squeeze it until we have a moment to stop and think. If we want to be people who does as God asks us, then we need to act straight away, even if that is only to give it some prayerful thought of the challenge that he's putting in front of us. When God speaks and challenges us, we need to make some kind of action straight away. Otherwise, our human nature will mean that the longer we leave it, the less likely we are to do it. When God speaks, we need to take action in the confidence because we are led by the same God who tells us in Jeremiah 29 that God has a plan for us. And it's a plan for a hope and a future. And that's the same God today. So God wouldn't ask us to do something that wasn't going to bring us hope and a future. And actually, he said that while the people were in Babylonian and under the greatest challenge they probably faced for a long time as a nation and a generation at that time. When God challenges us to do something for him, the people we have around us is important. And it's the relationship that we have with those people that's important. And at Friday Club, we've been doing about... I should have bought stickers, shouldn't I? We've been doing about friends. And I started the theme, I don't know when, beginning of September, and I finished the theme on Friday looking at a certain group of friends. Go on, who wants a sticker and a sweet? Go on then, Donna. Yeah, who were the friends? Tigger, Eeyore, and Piglet. There he is. Okay. All off my shelf at all. I'm always a big kid at heart. And we talked about these friends. Now, they're full fictional friends. But actually, despite the fact that they're fictional, there's a lot we can learn from them. They're all very different. And I actually pointed out on Friday night that if you actually saw these group of 4 friends together, a bear, a pig, a tiger, and a donkey, probably in nature, the only place you'd see them together is if one was eating the other. And yet, in children's stories, we see them here together as friends. But they're also very different in the way they are. Winnie the Pooh likes honey. The children were good at guessing these, I've got to say. Piglet is very shy. Tigger is full of fun and bouncing around. And Eeyore, well, Eeyore's always gloomy and sees the bad side of everything, really. But despite the differences, this group of friends are loyal to each other. They stand by each other. They stick together and they support each other. And they maybe make believe, but how is that like us? How is that reminiscent of the human relationships that we have and those that we actually find in the Bible? And I used the example on Friday night of Barnabas and Paul. And Barnabas and Paul, as many of you I'm sure will know, went around telling people about Jesus so that they too may find a living faith. And they travelled to lots of different places to do that. And they did it for quite a length of time. And they were loyal to each other and they stood by each other. But just like these 4 characters, Paul and Barnabas, if you actually research it, come from very, very different backgrounds. Their experiences of life were very, very different. And the way they saw things was very, very different. And one day we actually find that they actually have a disagreement. And they disagree over where they should be going next and who they should be taking with them to help them spread the word of who Jesus is. But despite that disagreement, we read that they both agreed to take with them the supporters that they thought they should, and they went on to spread the word of Jesus. Despite their disagreements and seeing things differently, they actually carried on in the mission and the challenge that God had given the two men. And it's probably because the disagreement in the middle of it, no one was right and no one was wrong. So they just agreed to continue. The Winnie the Pooh characters are very similar because they all saw the world very differently. And the two we immediately thought of at this point were Eeyore and Tigger. Now, Eeyore's my favourite character. Lots of people actually tell me I'm like Eeyore, although I kind of hope I'm not. But I probably am more like Eeyore than the other character that I'm going to talk about, which is Tigger. But can you imagine, and I don't know which one you'd relate to the most, but you can think of whichever of your friends would be the other one as well. Can you imagine? Tigger's always bouncing around. Tigger's always full of fun. Tigger's always full of energy. He's always on the go. And then you've got Eeyore, who's gloomy, sees the dark side of everything. Kind of everything's going to fall apart anyway, so what's the point in trying? There's always a bit of fear in there. There's always a bit of worrying. And you've got these two opposite characters. Tigger who wants to go and do it, and Eeyore who has to think it all through, ponder it all, and make sure he's ruled out any problems before he'll do anything. And you've got these two extremes, and yet, whenever you read the books or you watch the films or anything else, they remain friends. They remain working together. And some days it must be so frustrating for those two people to be friends. Me and Sheila used to work with a lady who I used to call Tigger on speed dinner, because I swear she could have bounced round quicker than Tigger around anywhere. And she was a Christian. And she was so full of life and energy. She used to drive everybody scatty because she wanted to do everything straight away and everything had to be now. And she was a new Christian, so she was full of all that, bursting with, let's do this, let's do that. And she never thought anything through, just like Tigger. She just bounced around the place from one thing to the next with all these great ideas. But actually, what we need to do to make sure that they can remain friends and make sure they can work together is they needed to learn to accept each other for who they were. And I think very often in human nature that's our challenge as well. Do we accept each other for who we are? Because we will face very different challenges in life. God will give us very different challenges and things for him to carry out because we are very different people. But once we actually accept each other, then it allows us to be honest and truthful with each other so that we can trust one another. And that way we can actually walk together and do things together. And we sit here this morning and we've sung, I can't remember what we sung now. I could remember a minute ago, now then I'll have to think. I have decided to follow Jesus. I couldn't remember what the line was, Lisa, thank you. I've decided to follow Jesus. And if we have decided to follow Jesus, then that means that daily we become more and more like him. And Jesus actually says that he is the way, the truth and the life. Therefore, as we grow, we become more like him. So if we accept one another the way that God accepts us, we will grow in trust, we will grow in truth, and we will grow together. When God challenges us by speaking to us or giving us a vision, he can do so as individuals or he can do so as a group. we can be sure that it is in his plan. We can step forward with confidence that he goes with us through whatever that challenge takes us, because he will be leading us if he asks us to go. The reason Peter could get out of the boat and walk on the water was because he asked Jesus, could he go to him? And Jesus said yes. Wherever God leads us, we will succeed. Despite what others may say and others may think, despite our own doubts, we will succeed if we go where God leads. When others are challenged by God, we need to support them in God's mission, even if we've not received the same challenge ourselves. Because sometimes it's about supporting one another. Or we may even see things differently, and we may question the challenge that somebody has been given from God. And we may need to take it to God in prayer before we support them. But equally, once we're sure that it is by God, despite what our ideas might be and the way that we might think that it should be different, we need to support each other, because we are all unique, and God will deal with each one of us in different ways. He will give us different missions, and he will give us different challenges in life, because he has a different plan and a different path for each of us. But in all of the challenges that we're given, in all of the plans that he makes, we need to learn to step out in faith and trust. Because if we are to do his work, to further his kingdom and for his glory, then that is what we need to do. So this morning, I finish where I started. And the challenge is, have we got what it takes? If we're going to step out in faith and trust, then we need to be people of character, people who have what it takes, and that comes from our confidence in God. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you that you call each one of us. There's not one person here who you haven't called by name. Lord, I thank you that you have a special job for each and every one of us to do. And Lord, I just pray that as you speak those words to us, as you speak those challenges to us, we'll be able to say, yes, Lord, we will go with you. And Lord, I also pray that you'll make us people who support each other, people who are growing in you. Lord, so that your kingdom may grow and more people may know of you. Lord, give each one of us what it takes and help our hearts to grow daily. So we ask this in your name. Amen.